design strategy has vanished. So I'm particularly interested in this forum, partly because there is currently no actual guidance on what a retrospective fire strategy, or any number of other names that tend to be given to them, should contain, what shape it should be, who would use them, and for what. So I'm attempting to assist in a collation of lists of who might use them, what for, what would be useful for them to be in, and then actually pass that on through the BSI to the drafting of the new British Standard 9994, which is specific for including the retrospective fire strategy.
Brilliant, thank you.
And I hope that came across. This is inaugural first use of my office with Starlink. So I'm sitting beside a roadside. Yeah. This is a lovely spring view behind me. So hopefully I'll come through clearly.
Fantastic, thank you, Ron. Yeah, so before we jump into the main purpose of the meeting, I wanted to just explain what we're trying to do. We've got 4 workshops today and tomorrow. Obviously, I don't expect people to come to all 4, but there's a few people that are coming to more than one. What we're doing with those, that this morning's is on fire strategies and fire and access strategies as well. It's not just fire. The one this afternoon is on the use of 360 digital asset capture, which actually is also part of what we're doing here today, because that's something that Ron already does. So that's part of the process. And then tomorrow morning we've got one on digital handover, and then in the afternoon we've got one that's looking at something very specific that could be really, really serious and catastrophic for social landlords, which is the new AWAB's law, which is looking not just at damp and mold, which is what it's really known as. It's also about emergency risks like fire safety, fire risks in residential apartments. So the reason I'm saying that is that a lot of the things that are relevant to this group here this morning, the same information is going to be useful for many other different purposes. And what we're trying to do is look at how we can gather that information in a way that then can be reused many times. And the other aspect of that's really the premise of the golden thread from my perspective. So what I'd like to do is just take a couple of minutes. There's a group of us over the last few weeks. We've been trying to look at what the golden thread actually means in terms of information capture, so that we can then use that to put some sort of value against it that can then be communicated up the line to senior directors who are controlling budgets. Because all of the people that are attending our workshops are people that are involved in information management to some extent. And the thing I think we all struggle with is, how do we communicate the value of having that information as opposed to not having the information? And if there's value in having the information, which I think is a given, what is that value, and how could it be captured more cost effectively so that it can then be reused many times? So we've got a group together that I'd like to invite you to participate in. We're going to arrange a Workstream meeting in a couple of weeks' time. But if I can just share with you quickly what our thinking is at the moment, um, so that you can decide whether it's something that you feel's worth getting involved with. Sorry, this is irritating. I'll try again. Okay, so you'll recognize the guidance, and I think part of the thing is to agree, what the golden thread is actually doing. And the key things are it's electronic, it covers the whole life cycle, and it needs to be easily transferred when there's a change of ownership. And I think that's an important thing that we need to recognize. So what we're trying to do is turn it into something tangible. What does the golden thread do for individuals? Um, and that's a definition of what it's doing. And the analogy that we're using is that it's like DNA that goes through an ecosystem of activities and solutions. But the important thing is that they all work together. And the premise that we're working on is that projects benefit from people working collaboratively, and therefore making sure that that's what we're trying to do with the Golden Thread Task Force, to determine why information's needed, who gathers it, and how do they go about it, who gains benefit from it, and what are those benefits, and what are the potential cost savings. So this is the exercise that we're going to try and flesh out over the next few weeks. So if you're interested in that, please join in, because the idea is that we've got that DNA that's running through all of the different processes.
So sorry, let me interrupt you. Sorry. So what is this? What's the purpose of this work stream, the new work stream?
It's to identify what the both the business and the financial value is of gaining the golden thread information. So all of the people that are involved in our groups, at the end of the day, it's all about information, isn't it? Making sure that we've got the right information for the right purpose.
So this is about maybe putting some sort of value on it. And
exactly.
Okay, right. Anybody interested in doing that, put golden thread in the chat. If you put golden thread in the chat, we'll be in touch with you to meet up over the next few weeks. Sorry, George.
Thank you. No, absolutely. So I'll just finish off with this, and then we'll get on to the meat of this particular group. What we've done is broken it down into a number of activities that people are carrying out. So on a new build, for example, there's probably, or a new project, not necessarily a new build, there's a number of activities that information managers on projects are doing, asset managers on projects are doing. And then for existing buildings, there's a whole range of different activities that people are carrying out for that as well. And then what we've tried to do is then translate that into some actual financial benefits. And we've come up with some that are, for example, what's the value of having more standardization and auditability? How can we use this to reduce risk? How can we use it to make it easier for supply chains to provide the information that's needed? So if we actually look at what we're going to be covering today in terms of the retrospective fire strategies, how can we get the information that's needed for the fire engineer, somebody like Ron Hedger, to be able to carry out that work? how do we, what's the value of having digital records and the golden thread itself? Then looking at this from a point of view of how can we achieve savings in operations, and then moving on from there. So the important thing about this as a total theme is that we're probably already collecting the information for different purposes. We're collecting it because it was contractually required, or it may be that there's a particular activity that you're responsible for, that information is being collected for. So if that's the case, that the information's already being collected, let's not waste it. Let's turn it into something that can then be used and reused and then be kept up to date. And we've then just looked at maybe some ways of putting some sort of cost against what's the value of having better information, and what's the impact on risk. So if this sort of thing resonates with you at all, then as Richard says, put your name in, put golden thread in the chat.
Can I just interrupt you, George? What we're looking at there is obviously a very broad range and pretty vague. We're looking at breaking that down, diving in there down to individual tasks even, so we can actually get some real world figures on there as an indication. So we're going to be asking people if they've got anything that they want to include in there, or if they've got instances, or there's any part that they can put a price on, a cost that if we hadn't done that, it would have cost us this. It's obviously anonymous, but anything like that you've got that you can contribute, however small it is, trust me, it's valuable because they're all the pieces of the jigsaw.
Good. Okay, that's it really. Richard, can I hand over to you for us to start looking at? You
can. Right, let me.
So the point about this is that this meeting is I think it's the third meeting that we've had on retrospective fire strategies, or it might be the second actually. And what we want to do is not repeat what we did last time. Let's learn from what the team came up with. I mean, many of you were in this meeting, but some of you weren't. So therefore, what Richard's going to do is step through this so that we're all on the same page and we're not wasting time. We can build on what's already been discussed. Okay?
Absolutely. So I'm going to try not to have to read all the way through it, but if it comes to that, then I apologize. Basically, the meeting was looking at the growing need for retrospective fire strategies. Why retrospective fire strategies are now essential. And the reason it came up with were SPVs are commissioning retrospective fire strategies for existing buildings because of gaps in the original design documentation and the need for reliable evidence to support fire risk assessments. Further, principal designers report that outdated or incomplete fire strategies undermine their ability to discharge duties under the Building Safety Act. And lastly on here, without an up-to-date fire strategies, FRAs become unreliable and may lead to unnecessary or incorrect remedial work. For example, replacing fire doors that are not part of compartmentation lines. Has anybody got anything they'd add to that? Why retrospective fire strategies are essential? Anybody got anything they'd add? If anyone puts their hand up, I can't see, George, so you'll have to.
Pierre, you're on mute.
Right.
Sorry.
I think it's important from establishing a benchmark. So any retroactive stuff is to give you an idea for future measurement against something. And it needs to be looking at things like the project type or the building type, because they have very different conditions in each case.
Yep.
And as generic as possible, but it does give you a benchmark. Thank you.
Right, could you do me a favor, Pierre? Would you put that in the chat for me?
Will do.
Thank you very much.
Andy Jackson.
Yeah, hello. I think the other thing as well as time and is a change of use. So we have a number of buildings where we have significant changes of use, and they kind of get looked at to make sure it's not going to be really significantly dangerous, but it doesn't actually get changed in the fire strategy. And so over a period of time, you end up wondering why something's been changed, how it's been changed, how it's going to affect the fire strategy, and how that's going to affect what was originally the idea, the concept behind the building.
Absolutely. Could you do me a favour and put that in the chat for me?
Yep.
Thank you.
I think that's a really important point, and it's something that we will, when we get to it, down. It was actually discussed, Andy, on the last session. I should just qualify the reason that term SPV is there for people that don't recognise it. This was initially initiated by Matt Wilkie, who's leading the PFI group within Building Asset Management. And in the PFI world, what Andy's just said there happens all the time, because the NHS Trust or whatever, they're often changing the way spaces are being used, and that information isn't fed back to anybody. So I think that's a really, really important point that Andy's made there, that there needs to be more interaction between the people that are using spaces and the overall strategy. So good point.
Paul.
Yeah, I mean, just going on from both of those points, really, we certainly need to know what the building is, its dimensions, its details, and what the requirements were at the time of original construction. But then you've got the change of use, and you've got the change and design changes within the building. But we're not just looking now at what I would call a first level design fire strategy anymore, because it's there, it's working, and the fire strategy should reflect all the systems that are in it and what they're supposed to be doing. So it shouldn't just say there needs to be a smoke control system. They should say it's got a smoke control system and it does this. Because this is the difference in levels of fire strategies that should be occurring through the construction process and then through the life of the building. And I'm sort of kind of hoping that Ron might chip in here, because it's a similar thing that we find, that people are looking to think they want to be compliant with what they should have been compliant with, but they don't actually address what's been put in to be compliant with that, let alone whether it was to be compliant today. And I think this is the level that there's a level of quite in-depth design goes on for these fire strategies, because people have really got to know how that building is going to function, and the fact that the stuff that's in it can be demonstrated to do that.
Just before Ron steps in on that, I'd just like to reinforce what Paul said there, because I think the critical thing is that the fire strategy needs to be constantly checked, I would say, to make sure it's actually performing as, or the systems that are part of that fire strategy are actually performing. And that's where I think we can bridge with things like digital twins to be able to identify scenarios that can then be tested against the strategy to ensure that the strategy is still fit for purpose, that reflects the reality of the situation that we've got. Does that make sense?
Yes. So sorry, before Ron comes in, can I just add a little bit? We are, as an industry generally, we are now saying that if you are to go into a building and do an inspection on whatever it is, so doors, dampers, smoke control systems, sprinklers, the first thing you should be asking for when you go in is, can I have the fire strategy, please? Because that's your basis to know what is in the building from your perspective, and it, somebody might have made design decisions or whatever it is, but you can't go into a building without a fire strategy if you don't know where the compartment lines are. You don't know what the requirements for the compartments are, because you can't check your products correctly if you don't have that level of information.
Perfect, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, Ron.
Right. So I'm finding the conversation and points very interesting, because all of my main points, the main reasons I can give for providing or having a fire strategy are in the Word document that you sent out. But I could probably spend most of the day providing detail is the how the strategy provides. So I've put my reply in the chat with the golden thread, because I hope that I might be able to provide fire safety for that. But I agree completely so far, particularly Andy Jackson's, which is that in effect the fire strategy for a building is the record of what the fire precautions have been provided to accommodate. And my experience of buildings through 35 years of fire in buildings is that people change little tiny bits of buildings. They may change a door, they may change a store to a room, whatever. And the use of the building and the accommodation within the building gradually evolves and creeps. The fire strategy needs to be a record of, well, what was it when it was last fully assessed for fire safety? And then the process that we are all very familiar with of fire risk assessment, one of the primary reasons for carrying out a fire risk assessment, and one of the primary questions to be asked when doing it is, has anything changed within the building which would require assessment? Well, that can only be actually answered if you have a record of what was in place in the building, as opposed to what it has gradually evolved into now, without anyone being aware of the fact that they've evolved it. So the fire strategy is the primary document on which all fire safety management, whether it is day-to-day management or whether it is management of new build or alterations or change of use or upgrade, it's the base document on which the whole thing sits.
Absolutely.
And without it, so that the general thing that really there's not so much upsets, but that gets me going, is the fact that a fire risk assessor is a very small part of fire safety management. But if you ask a fire risk assessor to come into a building with no fire strategy and no fire strategy plans, then you are asking them to do a chartered engineer's job as an entry-level engineering technician. The tasks do not match. That person coming in to do the fire risk assessment needs to have a clear provided, why it was provided, and what was there when it was provided, so they can look at the room, the space, the occupant, and go, is this what has been covered? No. Okay, need to pass it to someone who has the competence and experience to now make a new judgment on that.
Absolutely.
So Ron said something really important there, and that is that the information about what's changed needs to be provided to whoever's making that assessment. Now, one of the big challenges I think that we need to be addressing as the Golden Thread Group is, how do we make it easier for the people that are being asked that question to know what it is, know what the answer is? So the reason I'm saying that is that in the case of PFI, the responsible organisation is probably the facilities manager that's actually looking after that building. And if the if the trust doesn't tell them about the changes that they've made to maybe what's going into each storeroom, for example, if they're not providing them that information, then the whole fire strategy is compromised. So therefore, I think that we need to recognise that for the fire engineer to make the right assessment, there needs to be a mechanism where the information about how spaces are being used is actually fundamental. Sorry, I just thought I'd add that in.
No, that's fine. George, I need to ask you. Doing this exercise now is obviously generating a lot of conversation and points. Now, is that what you want, or do you want me
Yes.
just going through this for information for everybody?
No, I think this is very useful, and if we
Right,
can't get that whole, yeah.
absolutely. I was just checking because I was unsure. Okay, Mustafa.
Hi, just one point around the change of use that I think we should take into account. It's also around occupant behavior. So if you look at the recent incident in Switzerland around the sparkles on the champagne bottles, so it's around the behavior of the people that use these facilities. So you can change the use, but then you also need to take into account that occupant behavior as well as profile. So I think it could be one point that we could talk about in terms of why retrospective fire strategies may be useful.
Excellent. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Absolutely.
One thing I would say is that some of the questions and points that people are raising may well occur later on in the
bear in mind this
in the thing.
Yeah, let's stick to this. Let's be a bit strict on this. This is about why retrospective fire strategies are now essential. So if you've got a comment directly on that, if not, let's wait till the end because we may be covering it as we go through. Okay, so next, key problems identified in current practice. Historic buildings often lack fire strategies or have conflicting assumptions between fire engineers, clients, and PDs. Misinterpretation of compartmentation frequently results in wasted expenditure on inappropriate works. Regulation 38 packs are often incomplete, poorly coordinated, or not integrated with the fire strategy documents, which undermines both design and operational safety. And lastly on here, outsourced inspections for fire doors, fire stopping, etc., sometimes recommend works that contradict the intended strategy due to lack of contextual documentation. Okay, that's interesting. Who's got? I can see Ron's ready out of the traps. Is anybody who's got anything who thinks there's something that we're missing there and should be added in? Ron.
Right. Yes. Sorry, I thought I'd get in nice and early.
Absolutely. But please, can I ask you? Please focus on key problems identified. Yeah, because we will be going through the document. Thank you.
So this is the problem with the contents of a fire strategy, in that there are frequently additional fire precautions which are requested or required by other users other than the legal minimum to provide the legal minimum level of safety, as property protection, business policy, or business continuity and protection. These are quite frequently either not recorded as such in fire strategy. So, for instance, addition of sprinklers in a business premises is a huge benefit, but it's usually a business or property protection measure. Most fire strategies, if they are recorded at all, will just say sprinklers are provided. They don't say why the sprinklers were provided or whether they were incorporated into the minimum package of fire safety necessary for safe operation. Very, very important that the for fire precaution into the retrospective fire strategy as well. That way, enormous amounts of time and money are not wasted on, as a for example, checking fire doors that are not needing to be fire doors at all. Enormous amounts of time and money are wasted on that, whereas it's nice to have every door as a fire door, but only a proportion are required to provide the minimum safety. And if you know which ones are, then business decisions can be made as to whether to maintain those that are not required.
Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody else got anything they want to add into key problems identified?
Yeah, hi, Sandy Coldridge here. Hello, happy New Year, everyone. Just a quick comment on that in regards to kind of the difference between perhaps what we see as legacy buildings and that which I work on a daily basis, which is kind of the new build stuff with developers. I often find that I think part of the problem is when I speak to developers, what I get as a deliverable under R38, which I kind of have to go looking for the fire safety strategy. But more importantly, it's I ask the question is, what have you asked for? And I think that's an important question. What have they asked their supplier to provide? And then you realise actually it's not been procured. It's very much a kind of a basic package that's been delivered. And I think we're in a situation now where I'm saying we need to be very clear, as me and the business I work in need to be very clear and detailing in our contractual obligations what we require as a deliverable from the developer that has to include a full suite of information, at a granular level even, because if you don't ask for it, it's unlikely you're going to get it. And if it's documented and you don't get it, at least you've got some recourse. But I think, for me, the fundamental issue is actually that the developer isn't asking their supplier to provide a reason why they've got X number of sprinklers or why they're there or, what they're intended to do and so forth. So we get what we get because no one's asking the right questions is my comment.
Yeah. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, right, let's look at number 3. Conflicts between fire strategies and access strategies. Access control system, for example, maglocks, installed by subtenants or for security purposes, can directly conflict with required fire escape routes. Also, because subtenants often do not report changes in use or layout, landlords lack the information needed to maintain a valid building-wide strategy.
Yeah,
and
I think we recognise that the access control systems should be not should be as I understand it, tied into the fire safety system. So therefore, that shouldn't happen. But we found that it does happen because of maybe inappropriate ways that they've been installed. So that was really the point about that. We don't need to spend much time on that. That was one specific example that we're really raising.
Okay. Fire and access engineers rarely collaborate, which comes on what you were saying, resulting in contradictory assumptions about how people should enter, exit, or evacuate buildings. Okay, anybody got anything that they think should be going in there? Ian?
Yeah.
You're on mute.
Hi, happy New Year to everybody.
There you go.
Yeah, one thing we often see from sort of smoke ventilation side of things is where people doing access control have no idea about anything other than access control, and we often get people coming to service an access system and they disconnect things and they don't understand what the whole system does. So I think we see a lot of incompetence between people working on those sort of systems, especially doing maintenance and even on install, that there's very clear requirements and they just don't understand it because the oversight is not there and the people doing it are not engineers with enough experience and depth of knowledge, to understand what they're supposed to be achieving.
So
Absolutely.
To some extent, Ian, if we came back on what Paul was talking about right at the beginning, if we could also look at that from a point of view of maybe running tests and scenarios so that we could then check to see if that all works together as a holistic thing, then that address that, Ian? Could that help address that?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at it, well, if I put a smoke control system hat on, if we were working on a system or testing a system or commissioning a system, or servicing a system, whatever, we would always try and do an end-to-end test. So even things that weren't part of our supply, but which interacted with us, we would always expect it to be demonstrated to us, so that when we sign something off, we can tick enough, so tick the boxes, verify that the system does actually work. So the interactions that we would typically have would be things like door access systems, which are well specified and everyone should know what it is, but then we go and commission systems and they're not being connected, or someone's got the wrong polarity on their connections or whatever. So we would always say, well, when we test our system, start with a smoke detector, make sure the whole thing works end to end, and the airflow comes out the other end. If you don't test it end to end, how can you ever say system works? So, and there are things that we're not responsible for. We're not responsible maybe for power supplies or whatever. But if someone hasn't shown us that they're there, we can't say our system does what it's supposed to do. So, and if there is a case where that's not possible, then we would always caveat that on any commissioning certificate, saying it should be checked by a competent person or authorized person or whatever, just to say that the thing actually does work end to end. Because if things don't work end to end, what's the point of them? And that is the big issue I think we see in the industry, that people have their little silos and they do something that's good or maybe not good, but then it's how it all gets joined together. I mean, a really good example recently, I went to test a basement system, and it had been commissioned, and they put ceilings up that isolated the extract system from the areas it was supposed to work on, and it had all been signed off. And it'd been signed off by people that did fans and ducts, and they'd clearly been done when they commissioned it, and they'd signed it off as doing whatever it did, because no one was looking at the whole system.
Yeah.
So that is, that's new build buildings, whatever sort of buildings. But so how you capture that, I think it's about, people needing what we need to know is that it does work end to end, not that just a little bit works.
So that commissioning, that end-to-end commissioning test, as it were, for want of a better term, is there an argument, therefore, for that being done as a holistic thing, maybe each year, so that the things that were working at handover,
if they were,
let's assume
that we got over that hurdle, then the hurdle comes up every year. The hurdle then comes up every single year, because the maglock breaks, so someone then changes, it's got a different polarity, different voltage, different whatever, and people modify things unwittingly because it works for them, but they don't know whether it works for everyone else. So that's a good point. But I mean, I would say that getting a sort of an end-to-end sort of black building type test is not really going to happen during the life of a building. I think it's probably a bit unlikely in most cases. Should it? Maybe it should. But I just think it's a bit. It doesn't generally happen because it's such a complicated thing to do, in terms of everything has to be shut down. If you lose all power, you lose gas valves, you lose whatever, and you've then got to reinstate everything. It is a difficult test to do in a live building, I would say. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but it's a difficult ask, isn't it?
So
can I just come in on that?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, George. Ian, you raised a really good point, and it's something that I kind of see, quite regularly. I'm kind of going through it, actually today and for the remainder of this week. Commissioning certificates, evidence of commissioning certificates is great. It kind of ticks a box. But, the question is, are we running a tick box exercise? And to a degree, I want to say, do you know what? I think we potentially are. And that's the risk. Are we just ticking boxes because I've asked for and I've got? I think it comes back to your point, and I mentioned it with a colleague yesterday, is we put an awful lot of trust in those that sign these, whether it's a compliance certificate, deed of conformity or otherwise. A lot of trust in these individuals, and we have to trust what we get. Do I trust what I get? I don't. How do I combat or challenge that to confirm that what I've got is accurate? I kind of do have to kind of deploy people to site to validate that, and that comes at a cost. One of my biggest objectives is that what we take on doesn't become is fit for purpose and doesn't become a remedial activity that becomes a charge to the a service charge cost to the leaseholder, which is kind of, that's a disaster. You come year end, leaseholders challenging us, why are we paying for the remedial works that on a brand new building? And that's you can't argue your way out of that. That's just the situation. But I think you raise a valid point. Do we trust developers? Do I trust developers? Apologies for any developers on the call. I'd like to. Do I trust information? I don't. But how can I validate that what I've got is actually what is on site? I can't really without, as you say, going into ceiling voids, going into cavities, taking out panels, etc., and confirming. But that's the kind of the real world we're in. And unfortunately, as a deliverable, what I ask for is a complete suite of information compliance certificates, deeds of conformity, the full R38, the golden thread information that I need, full O&Ms. And currently, do you know what? I'm kind of really happy if I get 70% of what I've got after 6 months of asking. That's okay. Without kind of getting into the detail.
Okay, I need to move on. Paul Sheedy.
Quick on this one. My big issue right now, what I'm seeing in the biggest buildings in London, certainly the building I'm even in right now, 22 Bishopsgate, etc., there is no data at all on who is in the building. And considering the tallest ladder in London goes to 64 meters, which is about the 14th floor of high-rise buildings, does it really matter? You actually have no idea who's in there. And surely in a fire, the one thing you do need is how many people are in the building and where are they? And this is what's really missing here. The access control systems do not work. 22 Bishopsgate, one Canada Square, others, you walk in, you tag in, but actually you just walk straight out, so nobody knows you're in or out of the building. There's no data.
Yeah.
Leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. No. Howard Hall.
Morning, everyone. I won't say Happy New Year, but I just have. A couple of things, really. It's really interesting, the idea of this commissioning and whether it's actually an integrated commissioning or it's an independent or remote. And most of the time it is remote. With regard to a lot of the commissioning that we're doing for, I work across government buildings, but also outside in other buildings. It seems to be the one thing that's missing for me on the conflicts would be is a comment, say a fourth bullet saying sort of liaison with key stakeholders and commissioners. On the basis, lots of this is actually getting the right people around the right table to understand what the objective is. And also you could use permit to work, you can use contractual.
Well, that would be a solution, wouldn't it?
Well, it's not really, because it's the absence of an integrated delivery plan and stakeholder engagement that results in these remote issues occurring without being understood as a holistic event. I mean, everyone is doing the job they've been contracted to, but whether that's actually what's the knock-on effect of all those different actions is a key element, and it's the lack of a coordinated approach is a key issue. Because you're not actually looking to identify what the problems are. You're just looking as a cause and event, aren't you? Yeah. So it's a reactive, not a proactive. So it's the lack of a proactive approach, which is looking at how all of these things are integrated and actually are dependent. So it's the interdependencies of the access. Access you could do by making it a permit to work sort of workflow. Mm-hmm. So there's different things you can do, which are the solutions, but part of it is the fact that making sure people are aware of the interdependencies. And that's the one thing that's missing for me. I would put in there the fact that the lack of some form of coordinated approach actually means that these things get greater priority and focus because of the resultant actions.
Yeah. We'll pick that up in the chat. I've got people to write in the chat, haven't I? And I'd forgotten that we do it differently now, and we actually pick it up from the transcript. So apologies for that. Okay, Gareth.
Good morning, all. I've
Good
already
morning.
said Happy New Year and all that jazz. So,
Yeah,
I think
please desist.
there's one key point that has to be top of that list, and that is the responsible person's duty under the regulatory reform order, especially Article 8. That is the person who should quantify any change and its impact on the fire strategy and then ultimately a fire risk assessment. So we have to make sure that when we're going to site, who is the responsible person? Do they understand their duties? Have they recorded any changes? Have those changes been quantified, and does it change the cause and effect of the building? That's the starting point on any project. Who is the responsible person? In a new build situation, you may not get that till handover. So what's key is that a full Reg 38 audit is done. Obviously, Nicky Barrow put in the chat, why aren't building control checking it? Well, all they actually do is check that a Reg 38 pack exists. They don't quantify, is it valid? Does it hold the right level of information? So I think what has to happen, there has to be a peer review of a Reg 38 pack before it's issued. And that gives you a level of comfort that it's doing what it says on the tin. Retrospective wise, responsible person, do you know your duties? Article 8 basically stipulates any change that has an impact on the cause and effect, you have to record, update, etc., etc. So we've got to include responsible person's duties in this.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Pierre.
Gareth, I think one of the important parts is that many changes, the building will go through a number of different types of activities. So refurbishment, alterations, additions, etc. There has to be a mechanism by which somebody is the owner who goes through and says the door's changed. And even if they don't understand that the door had a particular performance requirement or is a fire door, whatever, it is raised as an issue, door's been changed. And that process needs to become integral in the operation of the building, because then it's a tick box exercise, but you're actually going and saying a door's changed. Now I have to actually go and check it. And I think that's really important for us to put that in as one of the requirements, because in absence of that responsible party, it's then informing that person they have something that they need to review. And I think that's an important step in there. Thank you.
I think the problem we've got, Pierre, and you're absolutely right, on any one asset, let alone multiple assets, you've got lots of moving parts. So you may have a responsible person, you may have a managing agent and a maintenance provider, etc., etc. All of the parties are not talking to each other. What really should be developed for any asset is an asset management plan. So you use HSG 68 as an example: plan, do, check, act. Basically, if you're planning any work, you're then checking, etc., etc., and recording all that data, and all the parties come together. The problem is, unless it's a HRB with a fire door change, you don't really need to inform anybody, and people are allowing that to fall through the cracks. Whereas obviously the gateway process allows for fire door changes, things like that. So it's being captured in the golden thread. When you get below 18 meters, it's different. There's lots of gaps. So really there needs to be, and it might not be a CDM project either. So you've not got it governed under the CDM regulations. So there's definitely a gap fill needed. And what I'm advising clients is generate an asset management plan that covers off any of your maintenance. So whether it's dampeners, fire doors, etc., and giving them a clear pathway process of what it triggers other parts of regulations that need to be updated. Reg 38 pack, fire strategy, fire risk assessment, whatever it may be, because people are just basically taking an asset and going, right, I need to put bums in beds, but they don't understand that any decision can have a knock-on effect to the end user. So I agree.
Okay, right, let's move on. We're on now. Compliance culture and oversight challenges. The meeting highlighted systemic issues, long-term system failure, for example, sprinkler systems offline for months, lack of ownership and unclear escalation routes when systems fail, the risk of regulatory or legal exposure, failures leave extensive digital evidence. FM teams often lack the specialist knowledge needed to interpret fire strategies, and CAFM systems usually record only statutory assets, excluding passive fire components. Okay. Who's got anything to say on that or add in there onto that? Actually, we don't really want to be discussing these. We want to be adding in new things.
And if you don't have anything to add, we can move on to the next one.
Absolutely. So should we move on to the next one, George?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, number 5, digitalization, data ownership and sustainability. There is an industry-wide momentum for digitizing fire information, real-time monitoring and golden thread evidence. Yeah, okay then. However, major concerns exist. Inconsistent templates and taxonomies across platforms, walled garden commercial models that lock clients into proprietary systems and restrict long-term access to their own data. Yeah, that happens quite a lot, doesn't it? QR-coded fire asset records often lead nowhere or are not maintained. The group agreed that digital solutions must be open standards, data must be client-owned and transferable, fire engineers need structured, standardized inputs. Anybody got anything to add on to there? Anything you think we've missed? No?
Sorry, Richard. Just a just a point here.
Yeah.
I think I'm part of the MHCOG sounding board for the CPR, which is being worked on actively. There's quite a lot which is going to be becoming public in the fairly near future, but certainly one of the big considerations is how do they tie in the digitization of fire-related information with the requirements which have already been set out in the green paper which was issued on the construction product reforms last year. So not exactly got an active point to add to your list right now, but certainly this is a big area which I think there's probably going to be more coming out on, or there will be more coming out in the near future.
Okay, excellent. Has anybody got
that's
anything they want to ask Nick about that? Sorry, George, go on.
I was just going to say, is that that's focused at products, is it, Nick?
It's product traceability. Well, the big bits out of it overall is product traceability and the testing and the standards of which it's going to be around. They're kind of in a really brief nutshell. There are a bunch of other things which are being considered from the feedback which is given, but certainly product passports and the collection of information around that is partly the intention of it, but it is going to be quite a serious piece over the next couple of years, and certainly the OPSS are part of that drive as well, because they're looking to prosecute people which aren't doing things properly. So the combination of fire safety is being brought in from that aspect of things, because obviously from a sustainability point of view, that's one thing. But the linking of fire safety and life critical information is certainly something they're looking at in a lot of detail, and they've started that process. There's some publicly available information on their website about that now.
One of the things I think is worth mentioning on that, Nick, that we can maybe pick up separately, But with the we were involved and have been involved for years with the Construction Products Association to try and find ways that manufacturers' product information can be standardized. And in fact, there was an initiative called Lexicon that was intended to do that. But there was a lot of resistance from the industry in being willing to follow that. Now, what's interesting with this is that I think this is a renewed area that that we can build on, and there's a few initiatives going on at the moment which you may not be aware of around standardized product data, manufacturers' product data. There's also a group called the ADS Alliance that have started talking to us, which is a group bringing together Uniclass, NRM, and SFG20, and I think some of the CIBSE standards as well. So the principal idea there is that you've got standard classifications against things, and if you can combine that with standard taxonomies, then it means that we've got some value. And there's a group within BIM in asset management that we're developing at the moment about that standardization side of things. So again, if anybody on this group's interested in participating in that, if you put standardization into the chat, we can include you in those discussions when we have them.
Sorry, George, don't want to take from your the point there. Just it's going to affect things in the not so distant future, but we'll perhaps catch up separately on some of the other points now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Andy Jackson.
Yeah, thanks. So the idea of product passports is great, and the idea of standardization. I know that the BSI were doing a lot of work on that, and they'd produced a standard. I've been trying to find it, but I can't remember what number it is. But that's really useful stuff. But the problem is on the actual ground floor is that when there's a project in place, you can have standardized projects, standardized products, but it's the actual guys on the ground. Are they using it, and how do we check? And when it comes to something fairly simple like fixings for, say, an external wall system, it's very difficult to check whether they are using the exact products that have been specified, or just the nearest thing that's to hand, or something that looks similar. And so it's not just actually the product, but it's being able to police that the use of those products as well.
Yeah, so part of that process, one of the things that we're trying to introduce is basically a technical submittal process, which everybody uses. Most construction companies have got a technical submittal process, but they're all different. So therefore, contractors are asking their supply chains to follow different procedures. And in many cases, the technical submittal process is capturing exactly the same information, but it's doing so in a way that is different. So that we've got several different big contractors interested or working with us on that to try and standardize that process. Okay,
right. Let's move through now to the number 6, which is golden thread, responsibility and use of space. There's confusion between the golden thread, compliance and critical information, and critical information, and generalist asset maintenance data. Accountable persons must define what information is required for each building, but understanding of these roles remains inconsistent. Changes in how residents use spaces significantly affect fire strategy validity, yet engagement is extremely difficult. Enforcement resources remain limited, meaning cultural change is still the key barrier. Okay, anybody got something they think we've missed? Let's not go through those. Let's just, if you've got anything new. Golden thread, responsibility and use of space. Okay, we'll move on to the group's agreed priorities. A repeatable and standardized method for producing retrospective fire strategies. Clear identification of information fire engineers need before they can undertake work efficiently. Use of 360 photography and structured templates to reduce cost and dependency on scarce specialists. Developing use cases to support the Golden Thread Task Force and demonstrate business value. Recruiting additional fire engineers and drafting a short terms of reference to help institutions approve involvement. Anyone else got any practical solutions? I know we've had quite a few actually already, haven't we, which we'll pick up. Anybody got anything else?
Richard, I've got something to add to this if when people are ready. If nobody's got anything to contribute at this stage, I did something this morning to basically use ChatGPT to look at the information that clearly it's come from lots of different sources, to identify what information is needed by people like Gareth and Ron. So the important thing here is to look at what is the key information that is probably being collected anyway for different purposes. So what we want is for that to be done so that the fire engineer is not having to waste time finding things that should be available. So I thought this was quite good. I've only spent probably half an hour on it, but I'd like to provide this to people and see if you agree with the approach. We've got occupancy there, the design intent, the key spatial information, passive fire measures, active fire measures, firefighting access and facilities, management and competence, interfaces, changelog, which is perhaps covering what Andy was talking about earlier, handover. So, for example, we can cover this in the meetings that we've got tomorrow. And then that's really where this comes. And I'd be interested, obviously for people like Ron and Gareth and are there any other people that on this call that actually do fire strategies? That would be helpful to know. Who else have we got on the call that are doing fire strategy?
Carl's got his
Sorry,
hand up. Or I don't know if that was saying yes, he's a fire strategist.
Yeah, we do them, George, at CHPK. So we do retrospective and fire strategies.
Fraser, yes, absolutely. So I think somebody's got a problem there.
Either that or we have terrestrial joining us.
Okay.
Bit of laughing gas.
Yeah, those people that are fire engineers, so I think we've probably got half a dozen or so from... Dear me, where's that coming from? Yeah, okay. Those people that are fire engineers, if I share this with you, would you mind taking a look at it and add to it or challenge it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because my feeling is that if we can tie that back into what I started with at the beginning, which is the things that are being done anyway as part of the general project information capture, then we can add a huge amount of value, because we're now starting to bring together the information that's needed so that people like Ron, I mean, rather than spending a couple of weeks maybe doing a fire strategy on something, it can be done maybe in a few days, because all of the information is already prepared, the standardized information, therefore it can then be done in a quicker way. Perhaps, I don't know.
It all helps, absolutely, because the biggest, Ron will say the same, the biggest problem is actually getting the information and people understanding what the information we need is. So if we can get it in a standardized way, it will speed it up. But it depends on the quality of the information. I mean, that's always the caveat, isn't it?
Of course.
Pierre.
I think very quickly, for everybody's sake, one of the things that's missing in all of this, George, is a CDE, or let's call it a sharing platform. And the reason behind that is that everybody's got a finger in the pie here. And what it is making sure that it's available, only collected once. Defined what has to be collected as a deliverable, but it's then available so that you can look and inspect and review off-site before you go on-site. And that will improve the amount of time that you're going to spend. It will have identified potentially little niggles on the way. So I think that's really important, and it will go to the bigger picture, ultimately, of every single project having access on a CDE of how that data can be the golden thread accessible thereafter. Security and all sorts of confidentiality things as well. Anyway, that's my thought.
No, absolutely. David. Sorry, you're going to say something, George? Silly me.
I was just going to say, I won't be arguing with you on that, Pierre, because that's something, obviously, that's what we do. But yeah, absolutely.
David. You're on mute. David Brigley.
Oh,
you're the extraterrestrial. Yeah, David, I can't even begin to express how you sound. Hello? Yeah, but sorry, you're going to have to sort something out with your mic, I think. Okay, right, George, have you got more to go on that?
No, I don't think so. That's it.
Shall I just finish up with the last bit here?
Yeah.
Which is what the next steps from the group were: workflows for retrospective fire strategies, standardization of inputs, collaborative case studies, potential international insights, and
Richard, Richard, you're not sharing.
I know I'm not. I'm reading them through quickly. Participants will contribute practical use cases, identify fire engineer contacts, and support development of a structured, reproducible methodology. So some very good, actually, next steps from that last meeting. Has anybody else got any idea of the next steps that we should be doing from this meeting? Because certainly the two follow on, don't they? Is anybody interested in getting involved in those next steps? Actually moving this forward from a discussion into something that is tangible. If so, put next steps in the chat. And then we'll be moving on from the last meeting and moving on from this meeting and actually getting something tangible. And instead of saying we need this workflow, we'll actually produce it. How about that? So put next steps into the chat. Very good. That's it. Keep coming, keep coming. Wonderful.
I think the important thing is to be able to identify what we need or what's needed for the retrospective fire strategy that's common to the information that's needed for example, digital handover, or the information that's needed, for example, for this new AWAB's law, for example. So if we can come up with something that is consistent, let's say, for example, you've got proper floor plans of the building, what the spaces are being used for, what measures are in place to protect people and protect the building and all that sort of stuff. That's probably common to most of the areas that we're involved with. So therefore, if we can create the demand from this group, this group's perhaps major focus should be on how can we make sure that we've got fire strategy that is current, that has been tested, continues to be tested, or continues to be testable, and also any changes are recorded in it. And as Pierre said there, making sure that, for example, if people are using a common data environment, let's do so in a way where changes are actually recorded in a machine readable format. Because if you don't do that, you're reliant on people and things just being document based, and things will get missed.
So next steps into the chat. So far we've got the Golden Thread group. Anybody wants to join the Golden Thread group, put Golden Thread in the chat. Anybody who wants to join the standardization group, put standardization in the chat. And if you want to join the, who just said it, what is it? Next steps.
Yeah.
If you want to join the next steps group, put that in the chat. Okay, excellent, excellent. We'll be looking to have the next step meeting.
Sorry, Richard, there's also, I think, did you mention standardization?
Yes, I did.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes, so we'll be looking to have this next steps meeting. The first meeting will be in February, probably early mid-February. From looking at the steps listed from the last meeting and picking up a few from this meeting, I can imagine that will have a lot of subgroups, sub-work streams, actually focusing probably, George, on each one, won't we? We're looking at workflows, if we're looking at use cases, that kind of thing. It's going to be possibly split down, isn't it?
Yes, I think so. So I'd like to ask one other thing, Richard, if I may. So the thing that's going to make this tangible is where there is a need for a retrospective fire strategy and then actually trying to deliver it. Yeah, so for example, one of the groups that we're involved with is the University Estates group, and one of the senior University Estates or one of the University Estates people, he's a fire engineer, and he was saying that I think he's got something like 80 odd buildings, and 80% of them he doesn't have fire strategies for. Now he recognizes that's a real problem, but when he goes to his senior management and says, I need an updated fire strategy for this building, it's not prioritized. Now, I think what would be quite useful is if this group is aware of clients or projects who would be receptive to working with us to deliver fire strategies in a lower cost and more efficient way, that they could get involved. I think that would be a good thing to suggest, because at the end of the day, people, this will become real when people are actually doing it, that it's taken maybe half the time to actually do this work because the information was available. So has anybody got any ideas on that? Does anybody think that's a good idea? We've got 10 minutes or so. Do you think that's a good idea to try and find actual projects where people can work collaboratively on? Maybe doing some stuff for free, maybe doing some stuff on a shared cost basis or something like that. Is there anybody that's got any ideas on that? Carl?
Yes, you might recall that my area is social housing. Certainly in my current remit, sheltered schemes being the higher risk premises. I'm not currently dealing with any higher risk residential buildings, formally higher risk. Consistently through my experience over many years now, sheltered schemes don't have fire strategies, neither from a building perspective, nor an occupancy perspective, nor a management perspective. They all typically have some procedures written down. They'll always have a fire risk assessment these days. Almost, I can say that with some great level of confidence. There's always a fire risk assessment in place, but that doesn't translate straightforwardly into a fire strategy. For lots of different reasons, I would like to put together fire strategy documents for the sheltered schemes I'm currently responsible for, and I offer those. I will need to get my client to agree. I think that they will. I would like to offer that small group of sheltered schemes as a case study for what you've described in terms of minimizing the cost of putting together that fire strategy. What I would hope to get from this group is peer review of the approach. Something that says, yes, this set of documentation, this information, these facts and so on are what we consider to be a fire strategy document.
I think that's really helpful, Carl. And the thing I like about it particularly is that there's an opportunity then to have that as a standardized type of building. I can't remember who mentioned it earlier, but somebody mentioned that earlier, to say we've got a standardized type of building. Therefore, we can then start to simplify what that's involved. If we could do it for schools or hotels or something pretty complex like a hospital would be probably more of a challenge. But there may be ways that we could standardize some of these things. I don't know. Does anybody else think that's a good idea?
Well, as long as it's permitted, George, because I've noticed that Camden, where I'm working, they have individual strategies for individual buildings in the same way that they have fire risk assessments for individual buildings, and they're written by the same surveyors. So, is there a standard that is used for fire risk strategies, or are you saying that there isn't one, and so there's a need for one now?
I'm suggesting it. If there isn't one, then we've probably got the expertise in this group to start shaping that. But yeah, Ron's put his hand up.
Sorry, can I just interrupt very quickly? I've put into the chat for Carl and anybody else the link for this afternoon's meeting. So it's 2 p.m. for the 360 Digital Capture meeting. If you want to join that, the link is in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Sorry.
Ron.
Yeah, I've been struggling with exactly that question for quite a while now. The guidance for the fire risk assessment was until very recently the PAS 79 1 and 2, and for either housing or commercial. The housing has now been replaced by the British Standard 7972. And I think the biggest confusion is between fire risk assessment and fire strategy, because when you read the guidance, what is termed a fire risk assessment is in fact, or what is termed a fire strategy is in fact a fire assessment. It's the full fire risk assessment report. And then what people do custom and practice as a fire risk assessment now is actually a fire risk assessment review, which in effect says, is what is there as it was? Is the use as it was? Is there a change that needs to be reviewed? And then it's an audit of the management of what has been provided. So a lot of these premises that don't have fire strategies actually do, but not recorded correctly. And so that's one of the want to be involved in this. How can we record what needs to be recorded? Just the minimum that's necessary to manage what's there correctly and identify when a change has been made that needs someone to assess it and recommend upgrades or changes. I have put together a draft document for a simple premises, which basically goes through the questions in a fire risk assessment template and provides the answers. So as an example, it might say, is the fire alarm adequate? The knee-jerk response is yes, but no, there's nothing in there that says describe it and describe why it's adequate. And so what I've tried to do is come up with a template that says, what is the fire alarm and how is it considered to be adequate, as one example. And then it goes, there's a full set of questions in the guidance that the risk assessor is supposed to ask. If you provide the risk assessor with the answers, then the fire risk assessment process is very quick and very simple. And it's very quick and simple to see when something has changed. And so I think that the full fire strategy report, which can be 60 pages, is what's necessary when looking at a building for which there is no providence whatsoever. And someone like myself or another fire engineer has to try and reinvent a suitable scheme. But most premises have been built to code compliance, and all you need to know is, well, what particular age of code was it built to, and therefore which standards were applied, and are they still enough? And then the on-site management just need to know that the fire alarm needs to be tested and serviced, the doors need to be checked and adjusted and serviced, replaced, whatever. So I'd be very keen to work with an estate provider to minimize the information that is necessary to get the job done, rather than a 60-page report for each simple building.
Well, that sounds excellent, Ron. I think we can bring together, Carl. Is there any other estates provider interested in participating in that? Well, if you are, then let us know. You don't need to commit at the moment. You probably don't have the resources. Connor.
Yeah. Good morning. I sat on the committee for 7972, and it was quite obvious that we were trying to write something completely different to a fire strategy. It was completely focused on devising not a template, but a standard for fire risk assessments. But following on from that, I do believe BSI have set up a committee now to draft a fire strategy standard. And although obviously it's in early days, that I wouldn't think that'll be more than 2 years in the writing.
So what do you do, Connor?
What do? I work for Coles International. I'm technical designer here, technical director here. I work in the compliance side of our business. So a lot of that is either sitting on committees or making sure that right standards, or making sure that what we do and the products that we make comply with those standards.
Excellent. That's great to have you on board. Good, Richard.
Okay, that's been quite a full meeting, hasn't it? Quite a very productive meeting. So we're just going to wind up shortly. So I'll just remind again, for anybody who wants to join us on the golden thread. Put golden thread on last steps, and standardization. Put standardization in the chat, and we'll be in touch with you for a meeting early mid-February on certainly on first steps. And I would imagine, George, the others will be in February as well, won't they?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, what I would reinforce is on this golden thread one, what we're actually going to be trying to focus on is that, so to be able to say what information is needed, and also how does that integrate with if information's being paid for, let's see how we can reuse it, but what's the value, so that we can cost justify it to the people that probably are paying us.
Absolutely. And hopefully get some real world examples to really cost justify that.
Oh, hello.
Okay, guys. Great, excellent meeting. See you next time.
Yeah.
I think there's background noise.
Yeah.
See you all. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Cheers all.
Cheers all. Cheers. Bye.